With the Chinese going direct to consumer for the first time on Amazon and decreasing your prices on the left, and Amazon aggregators who are buying lots of Amazon brands coming in from the right to increase the complexities and competition on Amazon, you may feel a little bit of a squeeze as a mom and pop or otherwise selling on Amazon. Today we talk with Joe Valley of Quiet Light Brokerage, one of the good guys in the Amazon space. If I've ever met anybody, I can speak no higher than I can of Joe Valley and Quiet Light Brokerage. He has sold countless businesses, and he is a big expert on all of the commotion that's happening in the market space as new Amazon aggregators are coming into the space and what that would mean for you as an Amazon seller. So even if you're not ready to sell an Amazon business, you need to listen to this podcast to hear what's going to come and what's happening, and hear it first right from Joe. I'm now joined by Joe Valley with Quiet Light Brokerage. Joe, thanks for coming on the My Amazon Guy podcast.
Good to be back. Well, wait, no, I haven't been here before. It was Mark that was here.
Yeah, Mark came last year, but I've been with you on your podcast twice, and your audience has been a perfect charm for us, and I'm really glad to have you on mine. There's a lot of buzz in the space right now concerning Amazon aggregators. And for the listeners who don't know, Amazon aggregators are businesses that buy lots of Amazon brands. Well, Joe has had his Quiet Light Brokerage for many years now. Tell me how, let me give a little background and history.
Quiet Light was founded actually in 2007, if you can imagine. Mark launched it. Mark's the original founder of the company, our current CEO and my business partner. I joined after selling my own e-commerce business in 2010. And then, I sold it in late 2010. I joined the company in early 2012. And personally, I've sold about 100 million in transactions, but now I'm just one of 12 advisors on the team. Actually, there's 14 if you count Mark and myself. So all we do is online businesses, and we've done lots of deals with aggregators. And there's a few key things you got to focus on if you're going to go direct to them.
So before we dive into that, you've done a lot of deals at Quiet Light Brokerage, and so the aggregators are new to the scene, right? Like they've just started popping up last year, and big names that people know about. Thrasio, of course, has raised $1 billion last year, another $750 million this year. There's like a list of 80 other aggregators that I've just become aware of in the last couple of weeks, and there's lots and lots of them. And they're going to develop out their business model. But at Quiet Light Brokerage, you guys are, bustling, I suspect, as well. Like more deals than you've ever had on your plate. Is that true?
Yeah. To put it bluntly, yes. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. We're growing the team further than we thought we ever would. I mean, we're an online organization just like everybody else, right? So we deal with the same challenges others do as well. We've got to grow the team while maintaining the quality of the brand and the services that we provide. And sometimes, always walk before you run, but know when to slow down and when to say no to certain deals that come our way, because we have to take care of what's in our current pipeline and work with so many new buyers now. And it's not just the aggregators. It's lots of, it's the original older one-off buyers that are there fighting for a business over an aggregator as well now too.
And the reason why I wanted to set up some of this inherency is because we're seeing a market shift, right? We're seeing a lot of things happening in the space. And so for those who are considering selling this year, I highly recommend that Quiet Light Brokerage is one of the companies you call. And Joe's going to come talk to us today about, if you decide to go it alone, if you decide to go to the aggregators, a few tips and recommendations to go out and do it on your own. So Joe, let's dive into that. I know you have some specific ideas on what people should be aware of.
Yeah. Let's just face the fact that we're all entrepreneurs and we think we can do anything, right? How many times have you said in your head, I've got this? And you find out it's more of a challenge than it was. I've done it all the time, and my wife makes fun of me when I say I'm going to build something because I don't like the price the contractor gave us. And I say, I got this. And then we end up hiring the contractor anyway. It cost me more in the long run. It's very much the same thing when selling your business on your own. But I'm going to share everything I know about the process of negotiating with an aggregator, a few key points that they look for in almost every transaction, and then some things you've got to consider to avoid, what I call the ignorance discount. So the way that the aggregators are working, they're all very intelligent, well-funded individuals, and they're actually very likable as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars to roll up FBA businesses. So you got to take all of that into account. Now, anybody listening that owns an Amazon business, odds are you've gotten an email in your inbox that said, hey, we want to buy your company. We can close with cash in 30 to 45 days. Lots of stuff. And they might even put in there, avoid the broker fee. All of that is a sales tool to get you to work with them directly. The first thing you've got to do is to not work with one directly, right? If you watch Shark Tank, there are always at least 5 sharks, sometimes 4, sometimes 6. But there's always at least 5, because you're not going to do a deal with just Mr. Wonderful, because it will be a royalty deal that everybody else makes fun of. So you've got to deal with more than one aggregator. If you get one email, just do a Google search for FBA roll-up companies, and you'll get a list of 50 of them, and reach out to all 50 of them and present your business for sale to them, if in fact you're going to do this on your own.
So shameless plug, we just launched AmazonAggregators.com, and we've listed out all of the aggregators. And so if you are curious who they are, you can go check them out. All right, so I like the Shark Tank analogy here, because for those that have watched Shark Tank, you can see like there's sometimes a bidding war on the good deals, right? Yeah. And that's kind of what a brokerage, such as Twilight Brokerage, would allow for, right?
Yeah. And I love the fact that you said on the good deals, right? When there's just one shark that makes an offer, it's usually a pretty crappy offer, and it's based upon the value of the company that they're looking at. It's the same thing in this world that we live in. If it's a really good business and it's priced right, we're going to see multiple offers. You've seen on Shark Tank when somebody goes in and they completely overprice it. Might be a good business, but the sharks all go, this guy, he's not in reality. I'm out. Just because you've overpriced it, I'm out. Same thing in this world that we live in with online transactions. Price it right, and you're going to get more buyers looking at it, possibly multiple offers, and you get to choose your buyer. It's not always about the dollar amount. It's often about the dollar amount and the deal structure. And deal structures change depending upon the size of the business, and of course, how many offers you're getting from either individual buyers or aggregators. So yeah, you want to get it out there to as many people as possible, and then focus in on certain things that we know you're going to get from aggregators. So this is all about dealing with an aggregator. So is it okay with you if we just jump into 3 main points that they always look for in a deal? All right, because we've already addressed that you shouldn't deal with one. But if you're dealing with one or more, know that they're going to generally look for 3 things in a transaction when they buy the business from you. And sometimes these are investor guidelines that they have to follow. Sometimes they say they have to follow them, but they can tweak them as needed. But the first thing they're going to look for is a working capital peg. A working capital peg is a phrase that's designed to completely and totally benefit the buyer. It's not good for you whatsoever. Usually when it's added to a letter of intent, it's not even a solid number. It's a fluid number, and the buyer, the investor, private equity firm, for instance, they use it more often than not. General buyers do not. They figure out what money they need in the bank account to have it operate before the business starts kicking in. It's usually accounts receivables, inventories, things of that nature. The aggregators have made it simpler. They do say avoid the broker fee, but then they say we want 2 months worth of inventory as a general working capital peg for free. So if you've got $300,000 worth of inventory on hand at the time of closing, and it's generally about $100,000 a month that you run through, they're going to seek $200,000 as a working capital peg. So that's your money in the bank that you've paid for inventory, but you're giving that up at closing. So they're looking for that, number one, first and foremost. It's difficult to give that up, in my opinion, because it's money in the bank. If you go out to multiple aggregators, if you're dealing with 5 or 6 of them, and you've got a good business priced at the right price, you can just simply say no. And odds are at least one of them are going to step up and say, not an issue. We don't need the working capital peg on the inventory. What you can always do on the inventory, if they're really pushing on the working capital peg, you say no, but, and that but is, I'll give you a 3-month seller note on it. That way you're achieving the same thing for them. They're not needing to come up with more money for the inventory. the business is paying for that inventory over a 3-month period. It's a very short seller note. That make sense?
Yeah, it does. But to break down that a little bit for those that may not understand what you mean by 3-month seller note, are you basically saying that the business will buy the next 3 months of inventory? Is that what you're saying?
Let's say you sold your business for $1 million and you've got $300,000 of inventory. In most cases, when you're dealing with a direct buyer, not an aggregator, you're going to sell that business for $1 million plus $300,000 in inventory at closing, right? There may be a small seller note, depends upon the size of the deal. And this size, not very much, but you get cash at closing for the inventory at full cost, and it's the landed cost of goods sold. With an aggregator, if they're seeking that working capital peg of 2 months and you're pushing back on it, if you've got lots of them making offers, you're going to be able to push back and shoot for cash. But if you've got a couple that are saying, no, we need the working capital peg, you just say, I'm not going to give you the 2 months worth of inventory for free. What I will do is give you a seller note on the full $300,000 of inventory, and that seller note will be just for 3 months. You can do 6 and be kind and be generous if you want, depending upon how desperately you want to sell your business. But what that does is they don't have to write a check at closing for that additional money. Because what they do in the private equity world, they calculate their multiple with inventory in it. Right. So if they're paying more at closing, it's gonna cost them more in terms of their multiple. So they'll just do a short seller note, or you're gonna do a short seller note, and they're gonna pay you 30 days out, they'll give you $100,000. 60 days out, another $100,000. 90 days, another $100,000. So you're gonna get a short seller note. You're gonna get paid for that inventory in full, but over the course of 3 months.
That makes more sense. I'm glad we dug in there a little bit more. So working capital peg, that's the first one. What's the second?
The second one is a holdback. They're all looking for a holdback. And if you do a Google search for a holdback when selling your business, you're probably not going to find it. It's a term that I believe Thrasio might have come up with first in the situation, or they might have stolen it from 101 Commerce, which was here before them, but they're no longer here. A holdback is essentially money that they're setting aside in the event your business falls off a cliff. So they're going to say, I'm going to pay you $1 million for your business, but I want anywhere between 10 and 25% holdback. And that money will be released in 12 months. If the revenue over the next 12 months is at least 90% of what it was for the 12 months prior to closing. So they're trying to protect themselves against things going downhill rapidly. If it drops by 10%, not a problem. You're still going to get the full holdback. But if it drops below 90% or 10% or greater than 10%, you're going to potentially lose. In this case, if it's $1 million, 10 to 25%, anywhere from $100,000 to $250,000. It creates 12 months of sleepless nights because you've got to wait for that money. But there are a few things that you can do that I'll talk about in terms of helping you sleep better at the end of the day here.
Maybe not, I don't know, let your best seller go out of stock right before you sell, stuff like that.
That's one of many for sure. They'll actually probably put off whole closing if you don't have inventory on the way, right? I've seen it happen. You got to manage your inventory as if you're going to run the business for the next 5 years. So you do not want to run out of inventory just before closing or just after closing, because they're going to look at it and say, well, look, we're going to postpone this 3 weeks or a month until the inventory shows up, because we're not going to buy the business and have no revenue on your bestseller for 30 days.
So in issues where that holdback has had to be utilized, you tell me what the right terminology is here, called in, if you will.
Yeah.
What's been like the top 1 or 2 reasons that that's happened?
Called in the sense of it not being paid out to the seller?
Yeah, because the business wasn't at 90%, like you mentioned.
Yeah, it's pretty simple, actually. With most of them, they're going to say 90% you get paid, 89.999% you don't get paid. And so it's simple and scary. So the way to offset that is a sliding scale. In every transaction we do at this point, we don't do a flat 90% that they originally will come out with on every offer. And so you adjust it. You say, okay, call it $250,000. At 90%, you're going to get paid out $250,000 in 12 months. But then you go, if it's 85 to 90%, you get 200. 80 to 85, you get 150, and so on and so forth, a sliding scale downward. You just don't want to go from $250,000 at 90% to nothing at 89.999%. Every time I've seen an offer come through at a flat 90 and we put in the sliding scale, it's been accepted. So you definitely want to add that in as a negotiating tool on the holdback.
I think that's a great technique. But is there usually like a particular reason that a business falls off after a deal? Like what can a seller do to prevent that, I guess?
Well, the seller really cannot do a whole lot to prevent it, unfortunately, because it's not their business anymore. One of the things that I would recommend is that you always negotiate view access to your seller account so you can look at reports. That way you can keep an eye on things, sleep better at night, knowing where the revenue is going. And, I had a case where I sold something to one of the aggregators and they could tell that inventory was looking kind of low. They could see what the sales through velocity was, and they still had a relationship with the manufacturer on a different non-competing product. And they had to keep reminding the aggregator that they were going to run out of inventory. So if one of the clauses we want to put in all of these, a couple of key points, and we'll jump to them. Number one is that obviously the holdbacks need to be on a sliding scale. But number two is, in the event they run out of inventory, and this is on the holdback and on the earnout that we haven't gotten to yet. But if they run out of inventory on any single SKU for more than X period, all bets are off. You get paid your holdback, you get paid your earnout. You got to put that in there, because think about these companies and how rapidly they're growing and how much human capital they need. They bring people on to run these Amazon's account to do inventory management. And it's tricky. It's difficult. And somebody takes their eye off the ball, and they're just an employee now. They're not an owner like you are. They don't care as much as you do. And it can be much more challenging. They run out of inventory and they don't hit their numbers. It's their fault, not yours. So you've got to have some sort of clause in there that if they screw up by running out of inventory on XYZ SKU for more than 1 week during a 12-month period, or a 3-month period, whatever period you put in there, that's safe and fair to both parties. All bets are off. You get paid the full earnout. You get paid the full holdback.
This is fantastic advice, Joe, and it's very on brand for Quiet Light to share all of this kind of information pretty freely. But I gotta say, like, this is extremely educational. Like, I didn't know these things coming into this call. Like, this is just like brand spanking new to me. I predict that a lot of the aggregators who are brand new are going to grow faster than they can keep up with, right? Which is, well, biased by Amazon guy, we're positioning our agency to service some of those needs. So if you end up selling your company, this is for the listeners, be sure to ask them how they plan to manage it, because that could be a key to part of your success as well, especially if they can pass off those keys to an agency like my Amazon guy. We come in and make sure that they hold their end of the bargain, but also grow your account for them. So shameless plug there. All right.
It's a good plug, and it's an incredibly valid point, because when I'm working with somebody in a long-term pipeline and they're eventually going to sell their business, we talk about all the different possibilities in terms of transactions. Look, the vast majority are cash, and mostly cash, right? I think the highest seller note I've ever seen is something like 50%. It's just because the buyer and seller fell absolutely in love with each other. A couple of women in their 50s, and it just worked out really well for the seller because it was part of her retirement account and she didn't want all the money up front. So usually it's 10, 20%, not much more. So you're going to get mostly cash. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to have any kind of earnout, if you're going to have to rely on the future success of the business, you want to ask that question. Well, who's going to manage it? What training do they have? How good are they? Don't just take their word for it because they raised a whole bunch of capital that they know how to run an Amazon account. What they know how to do is raise a whole bunch of capital. They need to run an Amazon account successfully and not run out of inventory and do everything properly so that they're not going to get suspended and have you ultimately pay the price for that. So I think it's a very, very critical question that somebody asks is, who's going to manage it? What experience do you really have? How quickly are you growing? How often do you bring on new people? What training program do they have when you bring on new people? All of these things are so critically important when you've got 100, 200, 300, 500,000, million on the line. It's critically important stuff to ask.
And I think a lot of the aggregators don't know the answers to some of those questions yet. They're still figuring that out, right? And nothing against the aggregators. They're just new, right? Like, it's a whole new space right now. All right, so are we moving into earnout next, or?
Yeah, we've gone. There's going to be a working capital peg. You know how to negotiate that a little bit. Seller note on your inventory if you have to. Hold back. You're going to do a sliding scale on the holdback. You're not going to go from 90 to nothing. You're going to do a sliding scale on that. And the third piece that they're going to look for is an earnout, right? So their goal is to give you as little cash up front as possible so that they've got more cash to buy more businesses. That's their goal. And they want the business they just bought to pay you. They don't want to have to do it themselves out of the money that they raised. So they're going to seek an earnout. Some of them are all of them are really good at marketing right now. So some of them are dubbing earnouts as a profit sharing plan. It's really, an earnout with just a pretty name on it, because you're going to get a percentage of the revenue of the business, or the gross profit of the business, or the profit of the business, based upon how well the business does or how well the business earns. So it's really an earnout, but they may dub it as profit sharing. The problem I have with either is that they're going to look for an earnout or a profit sharing on gross profit or discretionary earnings or EBITDA. It really needs to be only on top line revenues. And here's why. When you're initially doing a deal and you're courting, you're putting on your best face and you've got a wonderful relationship, and things are really, really good. And I'm talking about life here as well, right?
That sounds like going on my first date right now, Joe. Yeah.
It's no different. Well, you think about that, 3 years in or 2 years in or 1 year in or 20 years in, there's rocky roads and things get tough. And when things get tough, unfortunately, sometimes a few people have true colors that come out. And those true colors are protect myself first and foremost. I don't care about you. I did a deal on net income. I'm going to go ahead and pad the expenses in any way, shape, or form that I can. Now, haven't seen this yet with aggregators, but they're human. And if they put it in as a percentage of gross profit or a percentage of EBITDA, don't ever do a percentage of EBITDA. Simple math, right? You can log into the seller account and see what the total revenue is. You should be getting a percentage of that. Granted, it's going to be a much smaller percent of the EBITDA, but the math will work the same, so the payout is the same. You want to just keep it super simple so that you can calculate it easily and there's no way to pad things. I have seen a deal where there's a sizable earnout and the attorney we pushed for not doing it on the bottom line. The seller was really wanting to get the deal done. Attorney didn't do a very good job. The buyer was absolutely wonderful. Great guy. Things got ugly on his end with other businesses. And he ended up putting all of his contractor expenses into this one, we think. We don't know for sure because the seller's kind of letting it go because he's still getting paid on something else. So it's just ugly. You want to keep it simple. You don't want to give them any opportunity for manipulation in case the relationship goes bad. That's kind of the key. So just a percentage of the total revenue is the best and simplest way to go.
So I think these are all great tips. It's kind of like how to avoid your ignorance discount, if you will. I'm obviously stealing your phrase.
Hey, that's all right.
But I think those are fantastic tips. All right, so now we've told everybody, like, if you're going to go sell direct to an aggregator, what to do, sell the multiple, do all your due diligence. But let's plug Quiet Light Brokerage. Why should somebody not go to an aggregator? Why should they do a brokerage instead?
Well, look, we don't plug ourselves. We don't pitch. We don't sell. We just present the information and the facts, and we're here to help first and foremost. So this isn't really about Quiet Light right now. It's about people trying to get the real value for a business that they've built. They've put everything at risk and built their business, and they should get the value they deserve. And so, you really, because of this entrepreneurial, affliction that we all have where we think, I got this, you've got to make sure that you really do. And you want to avoid that ignorance discount, as you just mentioned. And so the phrase that I hear asked and said all the time is, oh, what kind of multiple are things selling for? Or I got a multiple of X. The reality is that the people that say they got a multiple of X, when we drill down to it, they're not sure what X is. And when people are saying, what are things selling for these days? They don't even know really how to calculate sellers' discretionary earnings and how many things go into it. So we want to help people avoid the ignorance discount. So when things are selling it as a multiple, and I don't want to get too into the weeds with this part of it because it's confusing, it's always a multiple of sellers' discretionary earnings, or SDE. It's not EBITDA. It's not your net income. It's SDE. That is because it's, well, the calculation, the formula is net income on your P&L plus add backs, right? So let's say your net income is zero, Stephen, but you pay yourself as an owner $250,000 a year. That's an owner benefit. Better way to figure it out. What's an owner benefit? What do I get as an owner? You get $250,000 a year of payroll. So that's an add back, right? So now your net income goes from zero to 250,000, but you also spend, I don't know, $500,000 a year on advertising using a 1% cashback card. That's $5,000, right? Did I do that math right? 500,000 times 1%? Yes. So you're not, I guarantee you the aggregator is not going to say, hey, Stephen, how much do you spend using your cashback credit card? I know you probably slide that money over to your personal account. I know your CPA said, don't worry about it. It's really a discount on advertising, but how much do you spend? Because I want to give you a multiple of that. They're not going to do that. But if you spend $500,000 a year on advertising, you get $5,000 a year in cashback money or rewards that can be converted. That should be in your add back schedule, broken down by month, and your multiple should be applied to that. So if you skip that when you're selling to an aggregator, you're giving them a nice ignorance discount and giving them instant equity. Because if there's $5,000 there, your business should be priced at, let's say, 15,000 or 20,000 more, depending upon the multiple that you're asking. I've seen that piece of information change the price of a business by up to like $150,000. Obviously, a very sizable business spending an awful lot of money on using their cashback cards for absolutely everything. But it's an enormous tool and it's an owner benefit, and people miss it most of the time.
That's a fantastic tip. Ignorance discount, $20,000 right there just for listening to a podcast. If you're looking to sell your company right now, this is like the master class of like things you got to get right. Because if you don't, you're leaving money on the table. So fantastic information, Joe.
A few other things that I've seen recently. I closed one in December, and they had raised their prices on their number one selling SKU by $4 6 months prior to selling the business. And we'll just go with simple math. Let's just say that they sold 1,000 units a month of that SKU where they raised it. So it's $4,000 additional dollars a month. It's already on the books for the most recent 12 months. The conversion rate didn't go down. Everything was pretty much, actually, the conversion rate went up a little bit, but we'll just say everything was the same.
Which is not uncommon. We've seen this before. I've run many tests on pricing, and sometimes raising prices actually increases conversion rates. It throws people off.
And that's the reason why you should plan to sell, not decide to sell. Because if you plan to sell and you implement some of these things, you're going to get much more value for your business. In this case, this woman did it. Let's just call it $4,000 a month in increased profit. It was on the books for the last 6 months, but for the very first 6 months prior to that, we did an adjustment in the add back schedule, right? Below net income. So we took total number of units sold times $4 for the first 6 months of the trailing 12. I know this is confusing, but the bottom line is, if it was just $4,000 a month, it's $24,000. She, let's say, got a 3-time multiple. That's, almost $75,000 added to the list price of her business because she raised prices and because we did a proper add back schedule and adjustment. I absolutely guarantee you that most people miss that. I guarantee you that an aggregator is not going to tell you that you missed that if you did in fact miss it. The other piece that you can do there, that's raising prices. What if you listen to one of Stephen's podcasts and you had somebody was on that was, helping people renegotiate cost of goods sold with their Chinese manufacturers, and they managed to reduce COGS by $2. I had this happen with a guy's name is Mike Jackness, right? He runs Ecom Crew. We sold his business, Color It. We did a 4-part podcast series on it. Mike was fine with it. The buyer's fine with it. So we gave away some information, right? But Mike had done that. He renegotiated cost of goods sold. I don't remember the exact amount, but it was about $2. And then he did that. It was probably in the 4 months prior to selling. So he had 8 months of COG reductions. So if an aggregator is going to buy that business, they're going to look at the numbers and they're going to see that and they're going to snicker because you just gave them a whole bunch of instant equity if you sell direct and you do not do an adjustment. But in Mike's case, we took the total number of units sold in the 8 months prior to the renegotiation times the new cost of goods sold reduction of $2. That alone increased the price of Mike's business with math and logic. It was sold to an aggregator, but it increased it by about $154,000. Just math and logic.
A lot of money.
It's a lot of dough. And it's real. It's real. I mean, look, and all right. So let's say people are going, oh, come on, seriously, that doesn't pass the common sense test or whatever. It does. Reverse it, right? Let's say your cost of goods sold went up by $2 in the last 4 months. Do you think an aggregator is not going to go, oh, wait a minute. Cost of goods sold have gone up by $2 for the last 4 months. We need to go back, right? We're projecting out what the purchase, what the future of the business is going to look like. They're going to go back and they're going to say, well, you sold $1,000, 1,000 units a month for the prior 8 months. So that's, $2,000. We're going to reduce the price of your business by that amount times the multiple. I guarantee you they're going to do that. So the reverse is opposite. You got to look out for yourself and use math and logic, nothing gray, just simple black and white stuff where you can do a calculation and present your business properly to avoid those ignorance discounts, as we call them.
There are so many ignorance discounts that we've gone over that it literally is going to add up to a few of our listeners in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
let me ask you a simple one, right? Get simple. A mastermind. Is a mastermind an add back? Yes, it is.
I never thought of this. This is interesting. Okay.
Yeah, right. So if you're in, look, I got the War Room Mastermind T-shirt on here today. So, if you're in War Room, your membership does not automatically carry forward to the new owner of the business. So that expense does not carry forward. Therefore, it's an add back because the expense does not carry forward. Aggregators are not, signing up for e-commerce crew or e-commerce fuel and different mastermind groups. So those expenses don't carry forward. So they're absolutely add backs. The only exception is if you're an agency and you go to Prosper Show or you go to certain events every year and you have a booth and you're selling your wares, right? That's a part of doing business that will carry forward to the new owner of the business because you have a booth. Whereas if you are an individual going to the Prosper Show or as part of a mastermind like e-commerce fuel, that expense does not carry forward to the new owner of the business, or not automatically part of the mastermind, and they may choose not to be. That's kind of the key. But if you take your CMO to these things every year, then the cost of your CMO should carry forward, but not you. It's a tricky thing, but it still passes the math and logic test, especially if you're selling to an aggregator, because they're not members of these masterminds. They'll go to all of these events, but they go to them anyway, and they're going as the aggregator. They're not going as the brand owner that of the product they're buying from you. And that doesn't add up to as much, I admit. But if you're spending a couple $100 a month on a mastermind group, that's $2,400 a year times 3 or 4. That's going to add another $7,500 to $10,000 onto the list price of your business. Mobile phones too, right? We all write off our mobile phones through the business. It's an add back. That expense does not carry forward because the buyer of your business, whether it's an aggregator or somebody else, they already have your mobile phone. They already have a mobile phone. If they don't, they shouldn't be buying an online business. Simple as that. And I've had that happen. I've had some people that are trying to buy a business and they're like, yes, they still have fax machines and they don't have mobile phones. I'm like, dude, you should not be buying an online business.
What do you mean? I shouldn't buy the most complex growing sector as passive income at my retirement? What are you talking, Joe?
Probably not, unless I buy it and I hand over the management of that to the Amazon guy, right? Or my Amazon guy. Yeah, no, I
tried to plug Quiet and here you are plugging me twice. So I'm going to do the same for you. So I got to tell you guys, I've known Quiet Light Brokerage for about a year. Our relationship has gotten closer over time. And the first time I met Joe brought me on behind the scenes and just started grilling me with Amazon questions. And so like Joe really knows his stuff. He knows how to investigate things. And if you're trying to consider, how to move forward with your business, I think you should look at all of the options, as Joe has said here. And Quiet Light Brokerage should absolutely be one of those options. And you heard it from Joe's mouth today. All the information he's freely given out, you can get access to a lot more behind the scenes as well.
Yeah, there's no question. Look, I know that we call ourselves advisors, but we have that broker stigma, right? And unfortunately, it comes with the territory. There are some brokers out there that are just trying to get their hooks into you for a commission. Oddly enough, we're here to help first and foremost. Every one of us on the team has built, bought, or sold their own online business, and they've had incredibly successful careers, and now they're here to help. And oddly enough, you see, I've got some gray on my chin. As you mature, you realize the more people you help, the more it helps your business. So,
because you're in the business of building relationships.
Yeah. So we help first, knowing that there's going to be some attrition there. Some of those folks are just going to try to go off and sell it on their own, and that's okay. They may refer people over to us. They may get a better deal. They may realize that it's not as easy and it didn't work, and then they come back. But we're going to help you. There's no retainer fee. My mentor, I told him about the business model back in 13 or 14. He's like, Joe, it sounds like you're just giving it all away for free and hoping that, somebody will sign an engagement letter. Yeah, Walter, that's exactly what we do. And it's a model that's worked out very well. So we will work with somebody in terms of an initial discovery call, looking at their profit and loss statements, telling them what's right, what's wrong, what their current value is, really helping them reverse engineer a path to their exit goal. The first thing I'll ask is, okay, what are you trying to achieve exit wise? Sometimes people say, well, I want a 4-time multiple. And here I go on that path again. Okay, a multiple of what? Let's talk about that. What's your current discretionary earnings? What is discretionary earnings? Are you using cash versus accrual? We didn't even get into that. There's so many little nuances that go into it that have to be right in order to get you the maximum value for the business that you deserve, because you've risked everything for it. But we'll go through that whole process. There's no fees. We're building relationships. Odds are along the way, you will see the value of working with an advisor at Quiet Light, and there's no place else that you will go, and you will realize going out on your own is probably not going to get you the best deal. The strangest thing that I could tell you now is that selling a business, being there, the fact that I've done it twice, it's emotional, right? And I've done it personally twice, but several hundred times for others, right? And the one that comes to mind is, I had a business that was originally listed for about $5 million. We had it under LOI in 3 weeks. 3 weeks into due diligence, my buyer called me on a Saturday. I was on the way home from a funeral. I'm like, this is bad. Saturday, I'm sad. And now he's calling me. What's going on? He's like, Joe, I can't do this. This is my seller. I'm like, okay, what's going on? Revenue grew so much that he felt like he was giving the business away. And I'm like, tell me about the numbers. He ran through the numbers. I'm like, yeah. If I was in your shoes, I would do the same thing. If we wait another 3 months, I'm guessing the business will probably be worth close to $8 million. So we pulled the plug on the letter of intent. Had that option. He pulled the plug. 3 weeks later, he was under LOI at $8.75 million.
Wow.
Because we were there to help first and foremost. But even that deal fell off the rails. And my job, or any advisor's job, if they're really good at it, is always to get the deal back on track. So 3 weeks prior to closing, this one totally derailed. He had promised to buy a house for one of his employees. And now it's falling off the rails. Talk about an emotional roller coaster. My job, that odd thing that I said about my role, is the most important part of my job is actually to manage people's expectations and emotions. The rest of it, math, logic, process, all that. The nuances, expectations and emotions. So he blew up. I mean, he was 3 weeks away from just under $9 million and buying a house for a key employee. He was very upset, but we got him settled down, and we ended up closing 3 weeks later. It's an emotional process. And when you go through that falling off the rails thing, which you will, if you sell
almost like falling out of love, right? Like you love your business. It's your everything. You every night you're thinking about it, and then you choose to sell it, and then all of a sudden you fall out of love a little bit.
Well,
right?
Well, you temporarily fall out of love because you're on the way to getting married, and then you have an argument. That's the business falling off the rails. When you get beyond the emotional stuff, you realize that getting married is the right thing to do, or closing is the right thing to do. And it's not just the seller that's emotional. The buyer can get emotional too. So the advisor in the middle needs to keep things or get things back on track, using math and logic and trying to eliminate the emotional aspect of it. It's a challenge, but the best ones can do it very well. And that's the tricky risk of selling a business on your own, is you're just so close to it that you may make the wrong decision. And that wrong decision may be like, okay, I tell you what, I'll give you a seller note on that to show you that I'm willing to take the risk with you. And you can pay me, that $1 million in 12 months. And it's just, and then you don't sleep for 12 months because you also did negotiate all those other things we wanted in there as well.
Yeah. Well, Joe, thank you for coming on the My Amazon Guy podcast. I got to say, your podcast is absolutely one of my favorites to listen to. And it's for all the same reasons we've talked about today. You are consistently just giving out all of your trade secrets, adding value, which is very much on brand for us too. We love that. Very, very respectful. So Joe, thank you for coming on and sharing all this great insight.
Good to be back, man. Appreciate it. Happy to help.
All right. That's the My Amazon Guy podcast. Be sure to go subscribe to the Quiet Life Brokerage podcast, hear more about Joe, and leave us a comment if you got any questions. I'm sure Joe might stop back around and check your questions out. Thanks so much.